Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer, currently in Chicago. We are looking at week 17, not the end of the season, for those of you still having that ingrained within you. We do have one more week after this one, but we are going to be looking at Christmas Day mostly here for the 25th as we get this out late on a Monday night. So a couple days in advance of when we have final stuff here, but definitely a good time to jump on these lines. So definitely make sure to subscribe to that page, continue to follow along, and don't miss any of the content we are bringing you throughout the rest of this NFL season. Also want to let you know that if you don't yet have a partnership or an account rather with BetMGM Sportsbook, we do have a great deal in partnership with them going right now for new users who sign up. Use the code TheLines YT50. That'll get you up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet that you make on the site fails to cash. And you'll also get $50 back in bonus bets regardless. So a nice little deal there if you are signing up for an account. We always recommend having as many accounts as possible to be able to shop those lines. So Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into your first play up prop here for Christmas Day.
Yeah, and most of the lines we are using are MGM here on these props, but this is the good price is gone here, I guess. Lamar Jackson, 47.5 rush yards is now minus 120. It was 45.5 when I bet it just a couple hours ago when it went up. But people are agreeing with this logic in the sense that, Houston is a man-heavy team. They play a top 5 rate of man coverage. They've struggled, therefore, to guard mobile quarterbacks. This season, 47.5 yards per game on 5.2 carries to the 4 guys, or Anthony Richardson twice, that I would regard as extremely mobile. And they gave up 33 to Pat Mahomes on a bum ankle last week. And now you get Lamar, who just toasted him for 100 yards on 11 carries in the playoffs last season. And I think that's why the public is probably getting on this more. But for me, it's also the fact that the Texans have a really good pass rush. And once you get in there, you're going to force Lamar to use his legs. Also, they have the ability to stop Derrick Henry. The last 3, 4th best yards per carry allowed, and top 5 in terms of first downs allowed via the rush. So if they can slow him down at all, force Lamar to drop back more, that's certainly going to help our chances of him deciding to take off. He's also passed for far less indoors than he has outdoors in general. The last 2 years, 80 yards per game fewer in a relatively small sample, but that's led to 10 rush attempts. So if you hate this price and you just want, some more positive potential EV here, it is plus 108 for him to get 9 carries, which is something he's been at pretty consistently when forced upon him. And a little special at FanDuel too is him and Derrick Henry both 25 yards in each half to get kind of that balanced 50-yard look. But the point is, good pass rushes early in the season. Lamar 122 against the Chiefs, 87 against Dallas, 72 against Eagles and your Giants. And so the last 2, he's landed exactly up 46 against the Steelers and Browns. Those are also good pass rushes. Just landed right on this number, basically. But we look at if the Ravens are challenged, and they are more often on the road, 61 yards per game, 9.5 carries. So it's just a cap in the sense that, I think this could be a sort of a playoff feel for the Ravens. It's a very important for their playoff standing here. Pittsburgh playing at the same time. Can they go ahead and take control of this division in one fell swoop on Christmas? And so if it's a big game, Lamar is going to be willing to take off with his legs.
Yeah, I was going to really start there with the idea that blood is in the water when you expect the Chiefs to handle business right against the Steelers. So that would leave the door wide open if he wants to grab that opportunity. And yeah, we talked about earlier in the season when it started to get cold, Lamar rushing a little bit less frequently. They had a larger stranglehold on the division, and they also were playing in colder weather, and now you don't have to worry about that nearly as much. So I think a lot of this sort of points to trending upwards for Lamar being a rusher in this game. Going over to that Steelers and Chiefs game, looking at Travis Kelce, looking at the receptions, they are 4.5. I've kind of resigned myself at this point of the season with really sharp lines to just drinking the juice on some of these plays that you really feel confident in. So I'm fine with minus 135, to be honest. 44.5 yards doesn't really scare me either. He's had pretty nice ADA and just average yards per reception as well. And he's still, up there in terms of this season being a top 3 tight end, wherever you want to place him. But he's currently number 2 in targets among tight ends. He's number 1 in routes run. So, he's always participating in the air game, especially with a lack of abundance of wide receivers in Kansas City right now. He's number 1 in air yards as well. And he's only got 5 drops on the season. So he's still reliable. He hasn't had any sort of the yips or anything like that to make you worry about him. There was a lack of usage earlier in the season. And we've also talked about on this show that there was probably an idea to keep him fresh for later in the year, and it's later in the year, and they need to sort of win out and also sort of take the opportunity to get that 1 seed in the AFC. And so if you look at the last 10 for Kelce, he's at 6.5 receptions per game at 51 yards. So you get a little bit of a cushion there with the receptions for him if you look at his averages when he's really started to be this big of a focal point of the offense. And in those games, that includes a game versus Buffalo, game versus San Francisco, both very good versus tight ends. And the thought here for the Steelers, something that you were bringing up that was a good observation, is the Bills did bracket him with their nice complement of safeties and linebackers with Matt Milano back in there as well. And so when you look at the way that the Steelers play cover 1, probably a lot less likely that the only guy you would have that you would feel like could come in and really help just blanket Travis Kelce would be Minkah Fitzpatrick. But with that cover 1 for the Steelers, Fitzpatrick's pretty far back there. Not likely that he's going to make his way all the way up to play in that sort of 7 to 10 yard range where you would expect Kelce to just sort of run, turn around, and catch that ball in those soft areas of that zone in the middle of the field if they're playing that. So, I think you look at the way that the Steelers, great defense, but when it comes to the number 1 wide receiver, which I think we would consider Kelce, he's playing in the slot more than anywhere else as well, and still the number 1 target, still the first read option for him. That's going to be a pretty good opportunity for him against this Steelers defense. So I like the fact that you need to get your yards through the air versus the Steelers. We know that maybe not as big of a pass funnel as others, but they still are much better against the run this year. So this would be a good opportunity to get Kelce for 5 receptions.
Yeah, it's the first downs that the Steelers allow through the air that you really think of when it's getting the receptions, because that's where Mahomes looks for him. Is like, all right, we just need to pick up this 7 here. And at this advanced age, right, he's not piling up yardage. That's why it's dropped all the way to 45. And I still think, it's gettable for sure when you look at the unrealized air yards. But you can really count on these short receptions in a playoff environment. It's the exact same thing we were just talking about with the Ravens. It's like, Chiefs, they've been saving Kelce for these types of games where it is basically a playoff type environment for them to test themselves, and they're going to need to lean on the guy that got them there. It's Christmas, baby. Can't you just picture him being all fired up and having a nice performance on the holiday? He's that kind of festive guy. But
yeah, right.
Let me go. Under CJ Stroud 60. It's 268.5 passing and rushing. This was actually another one that's getting steam, because it opened at 272, and that was just way off. Like, we're adding way too many rushing yards for this dude who's barely a rushing threat. I know he picked up 23 against the Chiefs, but in general averages 8.5 rushing yards per game at home, 3.3 yards per carry. He's not particularly fast. He had 3 carries for 9 yards in the playoffs against Baltimore last year, and 175 passing as they just kind of smothered him. And really the cap, I mean, it's a 2-part cap here because, like, first of all, the Texans don't have weapons. They have Nico Collins, and that's it. We're now, if Mechie can't go, who I would kind of like his props, if it's probably going to be like 25 yards. No Tank Dell. Mechie missed last game. We're talking about the corpse of Robert Woods and something Xavier Hutchinson. It's not that hard to cover. And to be frankly honest, like, the Ravens secondary has gotten a bad rap. Like, I mean, they needed their personnel is not bad. Zach Orr, the young defensive coordinator, needed some time to work with them. They gave up a ton of raw yardage early in the season because the offense blew teams out, and it was like total comeback mode. And they played some soft prevent, but lately they've been very, very good in terms of the raw yardage. I mean, 183 per game in the last 5. You say, one of those against Tim Boyle, sure. The other 4 are against very, very good teams, including the Steelers twice. And they can just completely control possession in this game, which would certainly hurt Stroud if the Texans have no success stopping the Henry Jackson combo rushing, right? I mean, in that playoff game, they had 38 minutes of possessions, did the Ravens. So CJ, just not going to have the volume. I mean, and this offense, like, people have figured it out all year pretty much. Like, it just hasn't been that explosive. I think if you take away Nico, what else can they really threaten you with? I don't quite have the balls for a Nico under but it's too high. I think at 91.5, like no way I would bet that over and just assume that he's going to burn these Ravens corners because I don't think they're that bad.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they have been sort of the victim of just volume, right, and the amount of passes coming at them. But we don't necessarily expect that to be the case here for the Texans, where they're just going to face a pass funnel situation. And I would agree. I mean, with him adding the rushing in there as well, you'd be surprised. The Ravens actually not getting too much pressure on there, still doing a good job of containment as for rushing out of the backfield, receiving out of the backfield as well. So I'm looking at that with you as well. I'll take another over here for a tight end in that Texans game and go with Dalton Schultz. Partly because you kind of talking about who are they going to throw to. Well, this is going to be the guy, more like outside of Nico, especially if there is no Mechie on the outside, which would be wild if Mechie came out with like a 25.5-yard prop where you're like, that kind of feels like what his like his average ADOT would be for the speedster. So it would be a really nice over if he does play. But for Dalton Schultz here, we're talking about him playing without Tank Dell. And like I said, wide receivers are at a premium at this point for them, considering Stephon Diggs is also out, as we know. And in the games he's played without Tank Dell, 6 of them on the Texans without him in his career since last season, 4.3 receptions on 6.5 targets, and looking at about 46 yards per game in those 6 games there. 5 of 7 of his targets for 43 yards last time he played Baltimore. That was in the playoffs, as you'll remember. So obviously familiar with being able to score against the team and get receptions and yards as well. He's very much so a part of the route participation right now. And if he's out there, then he's much more likely to be running a route than he is to be blocking for Joe Mixon and company. He's at 85% route participation for his last 5, 78% on the season overall, which is good for 6th amongst tight ends. He's also 5th in ADOT, which is why we were going here with the yards over just the receptions. He has had games with about 3 receptions with a nice average of about 16 yards per reception there. So that would be in line with this one. He's 3rd amongst tight ends in unrealized air yards. And so with Stroud and him really finding things, because they had a rough start to the season. So finding things over the course of the last 5 to 6 games, as we're talking about how he's ranked a lot more highly among tight ends as of late, that would sort of add up that these unrealized air yards are turning into realized over the course of the last 5 games, as opposed to overall in the season. The tight end would be a better spot. As you were saying, like the Ravens are going to be pretty good on the outside. Their cornerbacks rank pretty well. But when you start talking about over the middle of the field or in these 7-yard out route sort of zones, that's where they're going to be a weaker, as they've given up the 7th most receptions to tight ends and yards per game to the position. So this would be where you would target an over for any kind of receiving prop here to do with the Texans.
Yeah, I don't hate it even paired with a CJ under, because it's low enough and he's probably the second best option. Like I'm saying, I think the Ravens, if they're smart, try to take away Nico Collins, force some underneath throws to Schultz. So makes sense to me for sure. But last one here, I mean, I really do like this one, even though it might seem scary, is Najee Harris over 42.5 rushing yards, because he barely has played in the last 2 for the Steelers. And I mean, their offense has just looked like poo without George Pickens, but he's coming back, gives him some balance. And look, the last 2 were just really rough game flow and matchups against the Eagles and the Ravens on the road, right? Najee also was coming off an ankle, just barely was able to play in the first one there against the Eagles. And so you look at these snap counts and be like, oh man, Jaylen Warren is really out snapping him. He only played 17 snaps on Saturday, did Najee. Well, that on a short week, maybe that's a benefit going into the next one. And the Steelers, what are they going to want to do? Run, and run. Like, even though they have their outside weapon back, they're going to want to soften up this Chiefs defense. They're going to get back to what made them successful before this 3-game struggle fest. And they've been number 4 in rush play rate on the season. In the last 3, even when struggling, they've been number 10 in rush play rate. So they're not giving up on that. It looks like Chris Jones is going to be out for the Chiefs, which is huge. So you're going to actually probably have a lot more success pounding the rock if that's what Tomlin decides to do, and he's probably going to, because you have Mahomes on the other side. You got to shorten the game, and I don't think the Chiefs are pulling away from anyone. Just to again look at possible game flow, I don't think they're going to be down double digits in this one. The Steelers at home, no, don't think so. So I mean, you look at in general when he's in a neutral game script or somewhat positive at home this season, Najee's gotten about 18 carries a game for 74 yards per game, because the Steelers just pound the rock. Like I'm saying, only played 40% of the snaps against Cleveland last time they were home. got 16 carries on those snaps and 53 yards. So you look at it overall, fifth among RBs when he's under center getting the ball. Seventh, even still, when it's a stacked front, still gets 2.5 yards per carry, stuffed on the fourth fewest runs per carry in the league, and he's been able to evade a bunch of tackles, make something happen. He's having a good season, just had a couple duds in a row. So let's buy low on Najee.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always rooting for Najee. I think if you had Najee in fantasy when he was catching like 40, 50 balls in the season, you're always going to root for him because you've seen the talent. So yeah, I think as long as he gets the opportunity in this game, then you feel fine about it. It's just the volume, and I don't think he's going to get superseded enough in this one. You talk about the snap count for a reason. That's really the key here for him, is he's going to get the opportunities. And I think we both agree that he's going to. So, all right, let me go with number 3 for myself here. Going to a Thursday game here though, Seattle, Chicago, and I'm looking at the man who has been on the rise, as we know, and become probably the number 1 receiver in terms of Geno's first reads anyway. That's Jackson Smith and Jigba. For the Seahawks, he'll be playing out of the slot mostly in this game. We're taking him over 70.5 yards. And a lot is good for him in this game in terms of the way that he's been rising. And I think we're still getting some value on the yards. You also look at the matchup here. Coming out of the slot, going to be a lot better against that Bears pass defense, where they have been shutting down wide receivers on the outside, specifically, obviously, Jalen Johnson, who will be most likely matched up with DK, as we know. And DK, honestly, hasn't even been getting the same level of respect that JSN has been getting, or at least the same level of attention. When he's been in, it's been JSN getting the more of the looks here. He's out targeting DK in the last 4 games, specifically when they've all been out there together alongside Tyler Lockett as well. 26% of the target share versus 19% for DK. And like we're talking about here, good coverage out of this. It's easier to beat that coverage out of the slot and in the middle of the field, as opposed to having to deal with those safeties out in the corners and out on the outside. And last week, it was actually the biggest disparity that we've seen for him. So I'm just kind of riding this wave where he led the team with 12 targets, which is actually the most that he's had, more than DK. Now, when they've been out there, he hasn't had that many more than him, where DK I believe had the 7 targets in that one. 8 catches in that game, 95 yards in the tutty, 48% yard share as well. So that's really what we're looking at here too, is like he had 156 air yards in addition to about 30% of the target share. So not only is he getting peppered more, he's getting peppered further down the field more. So I really like the yards. I'm not scared of the receptions at all, but I think he's more liable, and you're safer to take yards with him when he's just as likely to get a 25 to 30 yard reception as anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no qualms with that. It's the same theory we've been using when the Vikings played the Bears a couple times, right? Is like we got Jalen on Justin Jefferson. We expect Addison to eat. He certainly did both times. So we got another favorable matchup for JSN. Don't have the full injury report here, but Kenneth Walker trending towards not playing in this one. I think you can definitely take Charbonnet as soon as you see that possibility. And on the other side, might take another DeAndre Swift under when that comes out, because Bears just lost 2 offensive linemen, I think, for the year. They just are, the vibes are very low. The Seahawks are desperate. Going to be cold here in Chicago, and I think they can stop the run here. Bears continue. Both these teams should be high pass rate over expectation. That's what we've seen several weeks now. So that is definitely good for your receiving prop here for JSN.
Yeah. Agreed. Yep. That is all the time we have for you for these Christmas Day, with a Thursday game as well thrown in there for week 17. Definitely make sure to subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along. We'll be back with you throughout the rest of this NFL season. Until we see you next, happy betting.